Hey y'all, welcome back. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Bonnethead and I do horror analysis on the internet. So far on this channel, we've covered a lot of films that have been really popular or at least have had a lot of buzz surrounding them. So today I wanted to try out something a little bit different. This film definitely flew under the radar, mostly because it did not have a theatrical release. It was actually a Hulu original, so it's only on Hulu. The reviews were also pretty average, with a 67% from the critics and a 57% from the audience, which I actually find it pretty surprising that the critics ended up liking it more than the audience. I thought it would be the other way around, but I guess I was wrong. So with all of that being said, today we're going to be talking about Mr. Crocket. Many of you may not have even heard of this film before, but I actually recommend you give it a watch if you have access to Hulu. It's a lot of fun and it is just visually a super interesting movie. Now, Mr. Crocket came out in 2024 and it was directed and written by Brandon Espy. He doesn't have a whole lot of history in directing. I think his only other feature film came out in 2018 and it was called Glass Jaw. That film was listed as a sports thriller, so he's definitely interested in the genre of horror. Mr. Crocket seems to be his more successful film of the two, but he's still kind of new to the directing world. Now, unsurprisingly to me, Mr. Crocket was actually originally a 6-minute short film. It was featured on season 3 of Hulu's show called Bite Size Halloween. They feature a bunch of different directors and short films and all of that kind of fun stuff during the Halloween season. Now, I'll talk about this a little bit more later, but this actually makes a whole lot of sense to me given the actual premise of the film. But once again, that's for my later analysis. Now, because it is a Hulu original, they don't really tend to have super big budgets. This movie only had a $17 million budget, which sounds like a lot, but as far as feature lengths go, it's relatively low budget, especially when you consider the set building and all of the props involved and the practical effects. I'm going to be talking about those a little bit more later. So with the general info out of the way, let's get into the plot. What is this movie actually about? The film takes place in 1993 in Pennsylvania in a small town called Shuri Bottom. Mr. Crocket, who is very well played by Elvis Nolasco, is the host of a children's show called Mr. Crockett's World. Think of it like if Mr. Rogers and Blue's Clues had a baby. Lots of bright colors, lots of puppets, lots of music, all of that kind of stuff that children love. It's really got that 90s flair to it. If you know, you know. The only problem being with Mr. Crocket is that he doesn't just teach kids how to share and how to play games. He's also there to teach the parents lessons, ones that are a little bit more permanent. Mr. Crocket is a supernatural entity whose show you can only watch if you have a VHS copy of it. But this VHS tape only shows up at the houses of children who have abusive or unfit parents. Once the child starts watching the show, this is sort of how Mr. Crocket enters the home. After some time spent with the child, he ends up killing their parents and saving the child from them. He brings the child into his world, which is the TV show, where they will then presumably live forever. Now, our story follows a recent widow named Summer attempting to raise her unruly child named Major. Summer is very unexpectedly a single mother who is left to raise this child who is also grieving the loss of his own father. They're both going through their own emotional roller coasters and they're clashing a lot because of it. Now, very expectedly, Summer ends up getting frustrated with Major, and this leads Mr. Crocket to believe that she is an unfit parent. So Mr. Crocket decides to take Major, leaving Summer to try and figure out how to get her son back. Now, already in the plot summary, you can probably kind of assume what this movie is about. There's two major themes here, one being parental abuse and two being generational trauma, and we're going to talk about both of them here. First, let's talk about the more obvious one being parental abuse. It's pretty heavily littered throughout the entire film. We're exposed to these themes pretty early on with Mr. Crocket's voiceover at the beginning of the film. He tells us that he's always watching, sort of like a deity or a god-like figure. Are you going to do good? Are you going to do bad? Do you deserve praise? Do you deserve punishment? And he suggests that bad parents don't deserve the love of their child the way he does, because in his mind, he will treat them better than these parents that he's taking the children from. So here we're exposed to a little bit of his MO, right? How does he choose his victims? How does he choose which child he needs to save? But what we end up finding out he can do is very carefully stalk families in search of children who are in unhappy homes. When he finds a child with who he deems to be bad parents, a little library with a VHS copy of his show in it will appear in their front yard. Now the parents, thinking nothing of it, maybe assuming that it's just a new addition to the neighborhood, take the VHS tape and give it to their child to watch. Like I said, this is how Mr. Crocket enters the home. The children very quickly become obsessed with Mr. Crocket's world and they want to watch it endlessly. These children become invested in Mr. Crocket and Mr. Crocket's world and his characters. They feel safe with him, as opposed to their parents who they do not feel safe with. Now, I believe this is meant to represent how children with bad home lives often look for certain escapes in life in order to distract themselves from their reality. This can commonly come in the form of lighthearted TV shows and books and just anything with some form of escapism to it. Now, once the parent has some sort of lash out or some sort of abusive episode, this is when Mr. Crocket is put into action. The VHS tape showing up at the house is more of a threat. It is the warning sign. But he doesn't actually start acting violent until he witnesses the parent doing something bad to the child. Once this happens, Mr. Crocket is able to come out of the TV and torture and brutally murder the parent. This is his sort of punishment for treating the child poorly. Our first interaction with this whole setup is when he appears in the home of a young boy who has an abusive father and a fearful and enabling mother. At this point, the VHS tape has already been introduced into the home, so Mr. Crocket is already here. But after he witnesses the father trying to force feed his son, who is full, Mr. Crocket comes out of the TV and ties the dad to this insanely cool chair puppet. The child is very excited to see Mr. Crocket because he feels safe with him. But as his father is bound to this chair, Mr. Crocket is torturing him. Mr. Crocket actually ends up killing the father by stuffing a bunch of disgusting food and random objects into an opening that he cut in his abdomen, effectively force feeding him. All the meanwhile, this huge chair puppet is making all kinds of jokes and being just kind of terrifying, but it is a fantastic kill. Lots of great visuals, lots of great practical effects. I loved it. Mr. Crocket also ends up appearing in the home of a young girl who has split parents and a heroin addict father. Now, after witnessing her father scream at her for being upset that her TV broke, Mr. Crocket appears. He turns the father's gun into a bubble gun and forces him to turn it on himself. He shoots a bubble into his mouth, but the bubble doesn't pop and it's ever expanding. So it ends up suffocating him and making his head explode. Again, another super creative and funny and ridiculous kill. We also very briefly see the aftermath of another kill where the father has their arms ripped off. This is right before we see Mr. Crocket coax a young girl into the portal that leads to his world. So we're seeing lots of different gory punishments of parental figures, but there's something here that's worth noting. It seems to me that Mr. Crocket only targets homes in the poor town of Shuri Bottom, Pennsylvania. It's clear to me that pretty much all of the parents that we see in this film are plagued by the systemic difficulties that come with poverty, and many of these same difficulties are what lead to their poor and abusive parenting. We're exposed to drug addiction, poor access to medical care, single parenthood, and even homelessness, all through the parents. Even the households where we don't necessarily see a direct tie to impoverishment still exist in the town of Shuri Bottom, which indicates impoverishment. It's a low-income area, so any family that lives in it is very likely also low income. Now, I'm not totally sure how much I like this specific framing for a couple of reasons. I think it ends up framing poverty as an indicator or an instigator of child abuse or neglect, which is obviously not true. Child abuse and child neglect happen in all classes in all kinds of neighborhoods, and in doing that, I think it ends up actually demonizing the parents who are under these financial circumstances. I'm not sure whether or not this framing was intentional, but I do sort of take issue with it, and I thought it was sort of worth pointing out. Now, speaking of the parents, let's talk about how they're represented a little bit. Through all of these situations, we are consistently left to see the parents as individuals, not necessarily as just parents. They are very strongly humanized, and therefore they are flawed. We see it most prominently with our main character, Summer, who has just lost her life partner and now has to raise the child that she had with him. She is not only left to deal with a son who is acting out as a result of his own grief completely by herself, but she's also working a full-time job and she's having to do all of the housework by herself. So with a closer look into her life, we're led to understand why she has the emotions that she does and why she ends up lashing out, even if it doesn't get to the levels of full-on abuse. We also see this with the father who was suffocated with a bubble. Though his reaction to his daughter's complaints about the TV are overly aggressive, we are led to not necessarily relate to the annoyance that he feels, but we understand it. His daughter is complaining about not having a TV for one night, and it seems like it's getting pretty late anyways, so she should be going to bed and it shouldn't be that big of a deal. But she's a child. She doesn't understand that. It is a big deal to her. And on top of that, he is a drug addict, so we do understand where his reaction is coming from even more so. Again, sort of humanizing him and therefore making him flawed. We also see Rhonda, who is the mother of the boy who had an abusive father at the beginning, like I was talking about. She was painted as a cowardly mother who did not protect her son from his abusive father. Again, we understand that she is afraid, likely because her husband also takes his anger out on her. So in doing nothing, she believes that she is keeping the peace. So with all of that being said, we're getting a very human look into the parents, which leads me into my next point about generational trauma. Now, Summer actually ends up making it into Mr. Crockett's world with a man who's claiming to have a missing daughter that he is searching for, who was also taken by Mr. Crocket. His name is Eddie. But once we are in Mr. Crockett's world, we very quickly learn that he himself was abused by his own father, when he was alive anyways. Now, once Mr. Crocket was old enough and strong enough, he actually ended up killing his own father. In doing this, he made it his mission, his destiny even, to protect children from abusive parents. We even hear this desire to protect children in a line in his theme song, which, by the way, was changed from "I'll be there to help you" in the short film to "I'll be there to protect you" in the feature length. I actually prefer the original version in the short film because the word protect feels a little bit out of place in the theme song. It feels a bit on the nose and not necessarily like it belongs in a song in a children's show. The word help feels a lot more fitting, but that's besides the point. This little bit of Mr. Crocket lore ends up actually feeding its way into the film itself, because we only ever see Mr. Crocket killing fathers. He doesn't kill mothers in the movie. He leaves both Summer and Rhonda alive. Again, this is presumably in relation to the trauma that he has with his own father. All of this goes to show that he definitely feels the most anger towards the fathers. We also find out that Eddie, the man who Summer believed to be a struggling parent who had also lost a child to Mr. Crocket, was the boy that was on Mr. Crocket's show when it originally aired. Mr. Crocket took the boy, Eddie, from his abusive parents and planned to raise him on his own. He wanted to raise him on his own, as his own. But when the police inevitably show up, things take a turn for the worse. Lots of confusion and heightened emotions actually ends up leading to the death of Mr. Crocket, who jumped in the way of Eddie to protect him from being shot to death. So even in his death, he was still protecting a child. As a result, Eddie had ended up growing an attachment to Mr. Crocket because he viewed him as a safe haven for his younger self in more ways than one. And consequentially, he ends up sort of being trapped in a childlike state of mind. We see this when he confronts Mr. Crocket on top of him listening to children's music in his car, which he claims is because of his daughter, who again, doesn't exist. But in Eddie's confrontation of Mr. Crocket, he finds out that Mr. Crocket does not like him anymore. He no longer sees Eddie as this innocent boy who needs protection from adults, but instead as a corrupt man. This leads us to understand that Mr. Crocket only loves children when they're just that, innocent children. This hints at the idea that parental abuse as a child ends up negatively impacting you as an adult. This can leave you to be corrupted by the trauma and end up causing you to re-inflict that trauma on the next generation. Again, generational trauma. Once again, we're seeing how the humanization of parental figures ends up leading to their flaws being exposed. And we see how their corruption is a result of their age and how they have experienced more in life. This corruption is largely a result of all of those things that they have experienced in life. And lastly, we see how this generational trauma continues even within Mr. Crocket. He wants Major to kill Summer just like he had killed his own father, which would continue this cycle of trauma and abuse. Only for Major to likely grow up, although I'm not sure if the children can grow up in his world, but if he did, he would likely inflict the same trauma on the next generation that he encounters. So lots of commentary on complicated relationships and generational trauma and parental abuse and all of these things, how that cycle continues. But I have a couple of critiques for this film that I believe would actually make it stronger. So like I said, the film was originally a short film, and you can definitely tell. The plot definitely felt like it was extrapolated from sort of a snapshot of an idea. And although I believe that the bite-sized Halloween short film at 6 minutes was way too short for it meaning the world that Brandon Espy had built around this character, I still felt like the hour-and-a-half feature length was too long for the underdeveloped portions of the plot. One of the most major underdeveloped portions of it was Rhonda's character. She felt very unnecessary. There's a scene where she's able to communicate with Mr. Crocket's world through this huge TV machine that she somehow managed to put together. This machine allows her to see what he's seeing and sort of access his vision. This whole scene is completely unexpected, completely unnecessary, and completely unexplained. It's the only purpose that Rhonda ends up serving, and it just kind of left me feeling confused as to why it was included in the first place. It only left me with even more questions as to how the universe functions, how she even figured out how the universe functions, all of that kind of stuff. And in saying that, the concept of this vigilante sort of supernatural TV show host feels very creepypasta to me. And that's not an insult at all. I love creepypastas. It feels like a much more well-developed kind of happy-appy situation, or some form of that lost media trope. This is not a critique necessarily, but it's definitely something I noticed. And it made the film feel more like an over-extrapolated snapshot, or like it was longer than it needed to be. My next critique is is that Eddie's character felt way too predictable. You could immediately tell he wasn't who he said he was, and that he had ulterior motives for wanting to get to Mr. Crocket. He shows up completely out of nowhere, and it is so easy to connect him to the missing children's articles that Summer was looking at in the library. We also never even get anything other than his word to confirm the fact that he's a parent that also lost a kid to Mr. Crocket. Lastly, I just wanted to mention that a lot of parts in the beginning felt kind of choppy and rushed, especially in the dialogue. Some of the dialogue felt very unnatural and sort of amateur. I felt like I was hearing the script talking and not people or characters. The cutting between some scenes and shots felt a little bit clumsy or a little bit rushed, but I would actually say this goes away once you get further into the movie. So with my critiques out of the way, I would like to get into my praises because I actually had quite a few for this film. The concept, although creepypasta in nature, is actually super cool. Taking a childlike concept and turning it into something scary is not unheard of in horror. It's been done multiple times. But it is difficult to pull off well, and I think this film actually did it. I'm thinking Five Nights at Freddy's. I'm thinking Chapter 1 of Poppy's Playtime. I'm thinking of that creepypasta on r/Snowsleep that's called something to the effect of "My family is cursed, a clown shows up at everyone's 10th birthday and nobody ever invites one or hires one," or something like that. It's difficult to take something childlike and nostalgic and turn it scary in an effective way that doesn't feel cheap, but I think it was done really well here. My next praise is the set and prop design was incredible. In my opinion, it was actually the best part of the film. Specifically, all of the unbelievably cool puppets. Both the friendly and the evil versions of the puppets are just so cool. They're so well designed, so well done, and it was fantastic to see puppets be incorporated into film again. I would also like to say that the practical gore was so much fun, especially in the evil versions of the puppets on the dark version of the set. They added a level of comedic charm that I think was just so effective. I also loved seeing all of the different ways that Mr. Crocket would pop up. I loved seeing his little eyes in the VCR. The scene where he's getting up from inside the TV is so cool. All of those little things I think are just awesome. I would also like to say that the branding of Mr. Crocket and his show was so well done and so believable. Such a strong intro with great animation, with puppets, with catchy songs. I mean, I couldn't get that song out of my head for at least a couple hours after I watched the film. The colors used, the show set, the characters all make it feel like such a real and believable children's show. Specifically one that existed during the 90s. I could totally see it existing in real life. On top of that, the cover of the VHS tape is completely spot on. So, final thoughts, right? By no means is it a perfect film, but I absolutely love seeing stuff like this get made. It's fun, it's gory, it's comedic, it's colorful. It's a unique concept that feels right at home in the fun, gory, creepypasta, campy side of horror that I love so much. And I'd absolutely love to see a more well-developed version of this get made, or even see it being transitioned into a creepypasta or a book of some sort. I think it would work so well in that environment. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about Mr. Crocket. If you guys enjoyed this analysis, then make sure you leave a like and even consider subscribing if you want to see more like this. Anyway, see y'all. Bye!